Michael Matheson, welcome to Ash Scotland, and thank you for coming to talk with us about 25 years of devolved health powers in the Scottish Parliament. Now, you were in the Scottish Parliament right from the outset. What was that like?
I think from 1999, when the Parliament was re-established, there has been a golden thread that's run right through the course of the last 25 years, where tackling health inequalities has been a priority for government, whichever political shade that government has been. And a key part of doing so has been around tobacco control. So I can remember from the very outset the proposal for a members' bill to be introduced around tackling smoking in restaurants, to then being developed further in the second Parliament, to when the then Scottish Executive decided to introduce legislation to ban smoking in public places. And we've saw over the course of the last 2 decades further progress being made in order to make sure we're doing everything we can to tackle very serious health challenges which are associated with tobacco use. And it'd be fair to say that over the course of that 2.5 decades with the Scottish Parliament, one of the strongest voices in advocating the need to tackle tobacco issues has been Ash, right through that whole period, in making sure that MSPs have access to good, factual information about the impact that tobacco is having in our society and the measures that we could take as a country in order to tackle it, given the impact it's having in driving health inequalities in Scotland.
So the ending of smoking in public spaces initially was a very unpopular suggestion, wasn't it?
Well, I can remember at the time there was a significant vocal lobby opposed to the idea of tackling smoking in public places. And I can understand why that was the case at the time, because it involved behaviour change. Anything that involves, from a policy perspective, having to get people to change their behaviour is always going to have a level of resistance. But I think if you were to go out and ask the public now, do you think it was the right policy to take forward? I'm pretty certain the vast majority of people would say, yes, it is. And it was the right decision to take at the time. So a very significant level of opposition. A lot of that opposition, though, wasn't just driven by the public. A lot of it was driven by the tobacco industry and also those within the retail sector who were making a significant amount of money out of tobacco-based products as well. And what was often lost in the course of that debate at times was the public health cost associated with tobacco use, the impact that it has on the number of people who die from tobacco-related illnesses, the cost to the taxpayer in terms of the health service. It was very often lost, and at times it was quite a challenging debate. But the debate wasn't just here in Scotland, because Scotland was taking forward, it was the first part of the UK to take forward a policy of this nature. There was quite a bit of opposition from out with Scotland, because it made it more difficult for example, at that time, the UK government to explain, well, why were you not doing the same thing? Given that Scotland was leading in this, that given the impact it would have in helping to improve and tackling health inequalities, reduce tobacco use. It was a debate. It was not only alive here in Scotland, but also out with Scotland. And that led to, I can see at the time, because it was a Labour executive we had in Scotland, tensions between the Scottish Executive and the UK government, which was a Labour government, around the policy direction of introducing a ban of smoking in public places. But there's no doubt in my mind it was absolutely the right policy to take forward, and the Executive were absolutely right to do so at the time.
And I suspect some of that opposition was manufactured by industry, and actually the public came with it very strongly, and as you say, it's been really successful. But the other thing I think has been successful is banning visibility, promotions, advertising for cigarette products, and you had quite a direct hand in that, didn't you?
Yeah, when I became Minister for Public Health in 2011, one of the areas that was still very clear to me was that tobacco continued to play a very prominent part in retail outlets. So if you think about how tobacco displays used to operate, they were the prime selling point very often within a shop. You'd go into a local shop, the big tobacco display there, which was usually funded by the tobacco industry with fancy packaging, lighting in order to attract people to the products. If you went into, I can remember even my own local supermarket, I won't mention the name of them, but actually, you know, as soon as you went through the checkout, what did you have? You had a tobacco, a cigarette desk for people to buy their cigarettes on the way out of the shop. It was prime location in the shop again. And if we were to try and reduce the risk of young people taking up smoking, it became very clear that we had to tackle the prominence of tobacco within our retail outlets. So we know that young people, if they are likely to take up smoking at a young age, they're likely to continue into older life with it and all the health consequences that go with that. So trying to particularly tackle the issue of making tobacco products look attractive was to introduce the ban in tobacco the displays at the point of sale. And I can remember in my office in Parliament at one point having a number of mock displays set up to decide on what was the most effective way in which to go about doing that. And in the end we decided on what was the complete covering of tobacco displays, which you see now, and people just take for granted. And interestingly, in my local supermarket, after that was introduced, that very prominent tobacco desk that they had after you went through the checkouts very quickly disappeared, and it moved to a corner of the shop, and then used this space as a cafe instead. So you can see they even recognised actually it was no longer with the display ban, it was no longer worth having the products in that very prominent location, which was just there to try and entice people to buy them.
And the gantries were designed and provided by tobacco companies in many cases. They put the displays in the way they wanted them, they had colours and so forth. But Scotland actually used its devolved powers to have a stronger solution than some other parts of the UK did, didn't they? We actually had less permitted display.
We did. So we took what some would say was a much stricter approach to the way in which the displays had to operate. I can remember at the time the approach we were taking, we were under pressure to take a similar approach to other parts of the UK. There were lots of arguments around how will people know which products are under which FAP, etc. The restrictions on what you could actually say on the units as well, the cost that was associated with it. And everyone knows that the reality is that one, shops manage them perfectly well, where the products are. Two, the cost of them, well, the reality is that the tobacco industry ended up paying for the costs of the gantries being replaced as well. But having said that, there was a further step that had to be taken. So banning the display in retail outlets was one step. The second step was the packaging that tobacco was in as well. Because you could see the way in which the tobacco companies would vary and change the packaging in a way not only to ensure brand loyalty but also to try and make it attractive to a new generation. So we were very, and I remember at the time having discussions with UK government ministers, very proactive in looking at whether we should actually then look at having the product, the single product type for the packaging, and at that time the UK government were resistant to it. I remember, I think if I recall correctly, I think the minister, the health minister in Wales, who subsequently became First Minister, I recall at the time, was very supportive of that idea of tackling this issue as well. We tried to do it on a full nations basis, weren't getting traction from the UK government, so we decided we would do it on our own here in Scotland through our own legislation. And having announced that and started that process, the UK government very quickly decided actually we will do it. And now you've got not only the ban and display but also in terms of packaging of tobacco, which again was a key part of helping to make it less attractive to young people.
And Australia, I think, was the world pioneer on plain packaging, and we learned from them.
Yeah.
But my recollection is the Scottish Government committed several years ahead of the UK government to plain packaging, and it was as you say, it was only when Scotland said we will go it alone if we have to, because we had been given fully devolved powers on tobacco advertising when Parliament was established. That's when things moved down south. So.
I do. I recall Australia, because I remember us looking very closely at what happened in Australia around plain packaging and their experience of plain packaging, and I think it was evident at that time, I think, that there was still a very significant tobacco lobby pressurising the UK government not to go down this route, given the introduction of the tobacco displays, that it was unnecessary, etc. And there was also questions about the benefits of it from a practical point of view in delivering on policy. I think you can see very quickly from the evidence in Australia that it did have a positive impact. It was the right thing to do. So after trying to persuade the UK government, because of their lack of desire at that particular point to introduce plain packaging, because we had devolved powers here in Scotland to do so, from a public health perspective, I set out that we will do it on our own if that's the case. Now, that very quickly drew a very significant level of opposition from the retail industry and of course the tobacco industry, given it would have a direct impact here in Scotland but not the rest of the UK, and they wanted to do it on a full nations basis. But to recognise that Scotland's public health record is particularly challenging compared to other parts of the UK. We don't have time to waste in taking forward the measures that we know can have an impact in helping to reduce and tackle health inequalities, such as tobacco use. So our time frame was different from theirs. But in the end, I think they saw the wisdom of the argument and the benefits of introducing plain packaging. And I think if I recall, they announced it quite close to a UK general election, which I think, if I recall correctly, rolled over into the next government to actually take it forward at that time. And I think we all look back now and recognise it was the right thing to do.
Yes, absolutely. And you, as Health Minister, were extremely principled about making progress with reducing tobacco use. So the 2013 strategy was quite groundbreaking, wasn't it? Tell me more about that and the end game idea.
So I was brought up in a household where my father was a smoker, and my father then died of lung cancer. He just couldn't give up smoking despite trying various things to give up smoking. So I always had a very, how would I describe it? I always had a very strong view on the need to tackle tobacco and tobacco use much more effectively. I was also, and anyone who looks at the data around the prevalence of smoking within our most deprived communities, it's sometimes 3, if not 4 times higher than our least deprived communities. It serves as a major driver of causing the health inequalities that we have within our own society. It's one of a number of things that cause these types of health inequalities. And if we are to create a fairer, more equal society, then we need to take action that will help to address these things and close down that gap. So one of the things that I wanted to do as Public Health Minister at that time was is not only to set out Scotland continue to be a leader in tobacco control by setting the 2034 target of creating a smoke-free generation. I think we were one of only a couple of countries in the world that had the ambition to set that target. But it was also about making sure that in setting the target that we continue to take forward policy that would tackle the issue of tobacco use. So at no point did we think, well, we've arrived at a point we need to do no more. We've banned displays, we have got plain packaging, we've changed our smoking cessation programmes to target those in our most deprived communities more. We've pretty much done as much as we can. We now just need to let people do what they want to do. Whereas by setting the 2034 target, it was an opportunity to say, no, there's much more for us still to do. And to drive forward policy going forward. So in setting that target, it means that whoever the minister is that's leading in tobacco control policy, whichever shade of government we have, unless they change the target, and I think that there's a lot of political hostility to doing so, is that they continue to have to look at what measures they need to implement in order to achieve a target of becoming a smoke-free generation by 2034. And it's a target that's still valid today and is still a critical part of shaping policy thinking in government in order to make sure we're making progress in targeting it.
So what I liked about the target, as well as Scotland being a world leader independently, setting a target when no one else in our immediate vicinity was even thinking about that, it was modelled at 5-year intervals.
Yeah.
So this is where we need to be, but the aim was to reduce smoking in all communities in Scotland to 5% or less.
Yes.
So to tackle that crucial health inequalities.
Yes.
In our poorest and most challenged sectors of society. So I love that the ambition was equity, the ambition was health. And you had another world-leading ambition and target in that strategy too, which was to halve the number of children exposed to tobacco smoke at home. So not regulating and legislating in the home, but to actually change the culture, change the practice.
So that goes back, so again it was a policy area which there was quite a bit of hostility towards it at the time. Accusations of the nanny state, etc. I remember we ran the campaign in order to tackle smoking at home, whereas take it right outside, which actually I think, if I recall correctly, some other parts of the world copied at one point, and I think it was recognised as being a very innovative approach to tackling smoking at home and the impact it then has on others that live within that home environment. So I think what you have is that, you know, over the course of from 1999 through to 2014, quite a significant amount of measures taken forward in order to tackle smoking and tobacco use in our society, all of which were very progressive policies in my view, and all of which have had a beneficial or a benefit to our society as a whole, and have been beneficial to helping to tackle the health inequalities which are associated with it. What I was always conscious of though was that in taking forward any policy that's trying to drive behaviour change in the way in which we were with tobacco control, is that the danger is that you can exacerbate the health inequalities if you don't configure it in a way that you ensure that you're targeting those who are very often the hardest to reach in trying to get them to change their use of tobacco and get them off smoking if possible through tobacco smoking cessation programs. So the wider policy aspects, public policy aspects are fine and they're important, but you also need to calibrate the way in which services are delivered so that you don't exacerbate health inequalities further by finding that those who are making use of the services that are available are those who are the most receptive to giving up smoking. Actually, it's the folk that are least receptive to these messages that we need to make sure we're trying to reach. So during my time, we also changed our targets around smoking cessation programs for our NHS boards in order to ensure there was a very particular focus on our most deprived communities. So 40% of their successes had to come from our most deprived communities. Up until then it was a broad-based target which they were given. That was to try and help to close down the gap that I was conscious could start opening up as we go forward. So that combination of public policy around legislation, through to changing targets that we set for our health boards, through to setting the ambition of becoming a smoke-free nation by 2034, in my view, said that Scotland's been a very progressive country in tackling tobacco use and also in tackling the health consequences that go with tobacco use. And what we can't afford to do is to think that we've achieved that outcome yet. There's still much more we need to do, and we need to be alive to how we can go about continuing to tackle not only tobacco use, but some of the variants of tobacco use that we're now seeing coming into the market, whether it be vaping, tobacco pouches, all of these things that can have an impact on an individual's health, and to look at what we need to do to try and help to regulate and deal with these challenges.
For me, one of the strengths of the Scottish Parliament is that it has focused on people and people's well-being and worked collaboratively in a cross-party way to get these measures over the line. And I think we've been up against a very well-resourced and sneaky set of multinational corporations who have challenged the government at every opportunity, including, I think with the display ban, they tried to sue government, didn't they?
Yeah, it's a legal challenge around it, yeah. So I think you've always got to, in any, I was very conscious at the time, prior to becoming a minister, when the Scottish Executive at the time were looking to introduce the ban on smoking in public places. I was being lobbied as a constituency MSP about the potential impact this would have on my constituents, and also how it would then feed into the illicit tobacco trade, because of the challenges that were associated with it being introduced. And most of that was coming from, it was information that was being produced by the tobacco industry, who had a very clear vested interest in the status quo and not seeing these changes. And then when it came to the display ban, it was the same textbook approach that you got from the tobacco industry. And you don't need to do this. No, these guarantees aren't there to try and help to entice people into smoking. No, we don't have shiny packaging to try and make them look as though they're attractive products for people to buy. It just happens to be how we do things. All of what, in my view, is just complete utter nonsense around the reality of it. Prime location, fancy packaging. It's all about marketing the products. And it wasn't just about marketing the products to those who are already smokers, it was trying to encourage other people to try smoking as well. So that's what it was all about. So throughout that time, you always had the tobacco industry, who sometimes wouldn't try to add pressure to the debate directly themselves. They would use a proxy. So they would use others within the industry, within the retail industry, to act as the, if you would like, the representatives who would present the opposing view to the policy we're taking forward. So there's always been a level where the tobacco industry have tried directly and indirectly to influence our tobacco control policy. In my view, they should have no seat at the table when it comes to public health policy. And we should take an evidence-based approach to these matters, and we should ensure that in doing so we do it in a way which continues to achieve our target of becoming a smoke-free nation by 2034.
So you're absolutely right. The Scottish Grocers Federation was described by Philip Morris at one point as one of its media messengers in Scotland on health issues. And they work through third parties and they fund through third parties, so their influence is not apparent always to elected representatives, although they put a lot of money and muscle behind that. And I think it skews democracy, because when our Scotland goes into low-income communities, they are telling us they want to move away from tobacco. They don't want their kids hooked on e-cigarettes. They are objecting to the colourful displays that are enticing people who were not smokers into using e-cigarettes. And I think the public opinion is probably even ahead of Parliament. And in my observation, we've got 10 years to go to 2034. In the 2013 strategy, which was brilliant, world-leading, innovative, there was a commitment for the Scottish Government to audit its compliance with Article 5.3. How does it keep the tobacco industry out of influencing health policy development? And we still haven't got that one over the line.
Okay.
And my feeling is that the Internal Markets Act has absolutely applied chill to the progress in the Scottish Parliament. There are fears about getting sued, there are fears about getting stopped. And I don't think, as a long-term advocate for progress on tobacco, I don't think the Scottish Parliament now can do some of the innovative, world-leading things you did in 2011, 2013. So I'll put that on the table. You can reply or not reply.
Yeah, I think there is an issue of confidence now around taking forward a direct public health policies now in Scotland, other policies as well, that could be challenged through the Internal Market Act in a way which we didn't have in the early years of the Scottish Parliament. So if I don't think we could have been as confident around the introduction of the ban of smoking in public places would be subject to challenge through the Internal Market Act if we tried to introduce it today. The same can be said for minimum unit pricing for alcohol. I suspect the Internal Markets Act would be used. That was also subject to a legal challenge by the Scottish Whisky Association at the time, which delayed it by a number of years as well. I think if we were to say now that we were going to introduce legislation for plain packaging, I think we very quickly find that we would have the tobacco industry and others saying the Internal Markets Act, there's a legal challenge here, it should be done on a full nations basis. So I think there is a risk that the Internal Markets Act could undermine our confidence, and I think it has undermined our confidence in being able to take forward the bold types of initiatives that we have over the course of the last 20 plus years in tackling tobacco control. And I think that's to be regretted. I hope with a changing government at a UK level we may see a different approach to it. My view is that the legislation should be repealed, but that's another matter, but it could have an impact. And we need to acknowledge that and recognise that. I think the important thing we should never get away from is that we can never afford ourselves to think that we've done everything we need to do. There is more to do. We continue to have in the region of about 16% of our deaths per year as a result of smoking related illnesses. We still have nearly in the region of probably around 90,000 admissions to hospital with smoking related illnesses. We know that in our most deprived communities that smoking continues to be 3 if not 4 times greater in our least deprived communities, then leading into the health inequalities that go with that. It continues to be a major factor in damaging people's health and in driving health inequalities in our communities. And we need to always look at what more we can do to tackle the issue of tobacco use and to make sure that we are on track to meet our target of 2034. And in doing all of that, my view is that the tobacco industry have no place at the table. They are not part of the debate. This is a public health debate. This is a public health policy being led by very clear evidence, and we should be very open and clear about that it will be driven by public health policy and public health evidence, not by retail or tobacco control or tobacco industry interests, because of the impact it still has in our society. And to this day, we need to be alive to that, and we need to recognise that there are malign influences out there who would seek to stop further progress. In my view, we need to be as bold in the next 10 years as we were in the last 25 years. Absolutely. So what would you like to see happen in the next 10 years if you had a kind of policy magic wand? So I think if there's anything that it concerns me the way in which we are now going from tobacco-based products such as cigarettes to seeing the way in which the tobacco industry has now moved into largely controlling the vaping industry. And to me it's a copybook of what it used to be like with cigarettes. The way in which the vaping industry now dedicated shops, variants of different variety for products, shiny packaging, and there's no doubt in my mind, and the evidence is emerging, and you know better than I, about the negative health impact that things like vaping can have. The way in which the tobacco industry will try to reinvent products in order to continue to make tobacco a product of choice for people, whether it be through pouches, etc. We can see how they are very manipulative in trying to move into that sector. So I think over the course of the next 10 years, continue to make sure that we are regulating tobacco products, but also vaping products much more effectively, because right now I don't think the level of regulation we have in place is right. And we've obviously got legislation which will look to do some of that, but I think we need to, we might have to be as bold as we were in our cigarette policy, or our vaping policy as well. That's not even getting into the environmental impact that we have, particularly disposable vapes, etc. So we're starting to move in that direction, but I think we always need to try to be one step ahead of the industry, particularly the tobacco industry, and what they are doing and how they're trying to influence products and influence the market, so that we are continuing to look at how we can regulate these areas to reduce the risk of young people being exposed to these products. And I think there's no point us getting to 2034 where we have succeeded in creating, reaching that target of a smoke-free generation, but then finding that we are now starting to experience significant health consequences due to excessive vaping use. So we need to think about how we manage that. I know there's policy already been taken forward on it, but I think the next 10 years we're going to have to be very, very proactive and bold in the policies we need to tackle that as well.
Yeah, personally I agree. I think we are with e-cigarettes now where we were with tobacco in the 50s.
Yeah. I don't want us to find ourselves waiting 10 years' time to then find out, actually these things aren't really good for us. I mean, evidence is starting to emerge. And we can see the way in which they're targeting young people with these products as well. We know, I know from our own children, in terms of, vaping is taking place in schools, etc. So we see it's growing and developing, we know what they're targeting, it's the same old playbook for them. So we need to make sure that we are prepared to tackle them, and we're able to tackle them in a bold, effective way over the years to come. Otherwise, it will drive health inequalities again, it will exacerbate them further, and we will see that there's many health consequences that the NHS then has to pick up the costs of as a result.
So Michael Matheson, thank you for reflecting on 25 years of achievement in Scotland's Parliament in terms of tackling tobacco, and thank you for all the landmark regulation policy moves that you brought in as Public Health Minister. And let's look ahead to the next 10 years. We have a very short space to 2034, but we appreciate the inspiration that you've brought today to the Scottish Parliament to keep pushing that, to keep working for the people of Scotland, and to keep tackling the inequalities that tobacco represent. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And also, I think it's only right that I take this opportunity to thank Ash for the work that you've been doing over the course of the last 25 years. My time as an MSP and as a minister, you're an invaluable contributor to this whole debate and helping to make sure that politicians are aware of the challenges and some of the options that they have available to us. And I don't think we would have saw I'm certain we wouldn't have saw the range of progress that we've made in tackling tobacco control without the input of Ash Scotland. So I hope that in the course of the next 10 years, as we approach 2034, Ash will continue to play a huge part in driving that public health agenda going forward with the ministers of the future.
Thank you.